Good evening, everyone.
Again, I just want to make sure, keep your questions concise so we can have time for the answers, and we can have enough people. We got a lot of folks that want to have ask questions.
If they get a vote before, they could not run it for office. I could not, I represented my and I could not answer a question. And I told people about yourself in mind. And defense of the report, you cannot get up and answer.
Let me find the person who is actually Miss Baker. How do we handle it in the past? We're gonna do this quickly. What we can always do is that person can write their question. And so we want to be fair. All right. We're gonna take Mary Dean's question and we'll go from there. All right.
Okay, this question is to Congressman Pompeo, and I'd like to ask you, sir, your positions on 3 issues that you voted on in Washington. Number 1, what is your position about the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare? Number 2, what is your position about the tax cuts for the rich? Do you support them to continue on, or what? And number 3, what is your position on the, I just went blank there. I'm sorry. Continue the war in Afghanistan. Do you think that the soldiers should be brought home and that money should be used to rebuild our infrastructure, or what? Those are 3 issues that I'd like to know what your position was on. Thank you.
I'm happy to try to take all 3. I have voted multiple times to repeal in its entirety the Affordable Care Act. I think it's been devastating for jobs all across America, and I think it will be absolutely devastating for access to health care in the United States as well, especially in Kansas. You talk to physicians. I was just out with a group of them.
I didn't answer the question.
I was just out in the most western part of the district, in a town called Coldwater, Kansas. I talked to a number of physicians with Medicare reimbursement rates under the Affordable Care Act. They are desperately afraid that their rural hospitals will not be able to continue to operate. We see this in our critical access care hospitals all across the state of Kansas. The Affordable Care Act did nothing to control the primary issue with American health care, access and cost. Indeed, in my judgment, it went backwards. It made each of those worse. And so I think we need to undo it. I ran a small business before I ran for Congress. The healthcare system had deep flaws long before the Affordable Care Act came into being. There's lots of changes that we will need to make to healthcare in America, but we went backwards in my judgment with the Affordable Care Act. Your second question was about taxes. You went blank on it, just did for a second there as well. I don't think we should increase taxes on anyone. Indeed, President Obama said it himself. He said, when the economy is weak, you don't want to increase taxes on anyone. And I continue to believe that that's the right thing. On January 1st, if we don't act, everybody in this room will have their taxes go up. Everyone in this room. Payroll tax will go up. Ordinary income tax rates will go up on everyone. A series of deductions that especially hit low-income people will go up. We've got to fix it. And I hope that when I go back after the election, we'll be serious, Democrats and Republicans alike, and do just that. And your third question was about the war, or I'd say 2 things. First of all, I assume you're referring to Afghanistan. We've got soldiers in 150 plus countries all across the world. I was one of them 25 years, more than that pounds ago. We have got to make sure that we keep America safe. I don't think that requires 150,000 most of the Marines and Army in Afghanistan. We brought some of them back. We need to continue to do that. But if we think for a moment that we, as folks living in Kansas, can withdraw from the world and still have a safe place to live, I think we are sadly mistaken. So I think it's incredibly important that we continue to have a strong and robust national security program all across the world.
And since I am a first-time moderator, I get the privilege of saying you can go ahead because you are a constituent, again, of Mike Pompeo. but we also, so we can open it up to everyone to ask questions. So we want to, again, make sure they're concise so that we can keep it going.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to each of you who have come out to share with us today. My question, in our community, a lot of family members die and they don't have life insurance. And a lot of them will have to do fundraisers to bury their family members. On the state level, we've cut some of that funding, and I am hoping to restore some of that funding coming back to the local levels to help those families. This question is for all three, but again, it's a pleasure to see you, Mike, Congressman Mike Pompeo. In 2010, when you and I were running, I think I was running for county commissioner, we would go to events together. We had an opportunity to speak at that time, and we talked about our veterans who have to go to the VA, and in order to get an ambulance to take them there, they've got to get that pre-authorized, and a lot of VA senior citizens have contacted me, and I've helped them over the years to get their $600 ambulance ride reversed, where they don't have to pay that. And you and I talked about helping, and that's a federal issue. And I was wondering where you were at with that, and because we haven't talked in a while, is that something you would help us with? Thank you so much.
One of the reasons why we have things cut is special interest. Most candidates, when they run for office, they have to promise, well, first of all, they ask for money, and to receive money, they make promises of concessions, or at least they will lean a certain way. And when they get into office, they have to fulfill those promises. Our veterans have served our country, and they deserve our respect. Many times when they come to funding the veterans programs and funding medicine and care for the veterans, it gets caught up in red tape where a congressman has promised some donor that he will cut taxes, he will do this, he will do that, and it falls on the shoulders of the weak and the poor and the people who don't end up having representation. I would put a stop to all that, because I believe in supporting social programs. Some people call them entitlement programs. And those are the type of programs that the rich are trying to cut out. Those are the type of programs that the Koch brothers are against, because the Koch brothers want all the money so they can give it to Pompeo.
I myself am a veteran of the United States Navy, and I did serve 25 years ago. And I have been back in Kansas ever since. I also use the VA hospital, the Robert J. Dole VA Center, and it's a really nice place. If you haven't been there, for whatever reason, if you can't go, it really is a nice establishment. There is, for people that are veterans, or they have a veteran in the house, you can receive your veteran's handbook, which is something I did when I moved into the area. And it describes their radiuses that you have to have, as well as income guidelines as far as the travel reimbursement. And it doesn't have to necessarily be ambulance. They also reimburse mileage for people have to drive in for their appointment. Now, sometimes they have to cut money out of federal programs, and transportation is one where they may have to cut. And when fuel costs go up, that's kind of the areas that I think they look at cutting. If there was I think we need to protect and support our veterans, because I'm a veteran. Mike's a veteran. Robert, you served?
I served in the Kansas Army National Guard. I have no veteran status, but I served.
So you need to support our veterans, and it's almost a selfish reach in this instance, because we've all served at some point. But we do need to help them. So if they said we need to cut all services, I think what we need to do is find a balance of how we provide the services and be able to afford to provide the services both.
Great. I got to take a question from my state senator, Senator Fausto, as well. We haven't made much progress on the issue that you spoke about, the transit issue for veterans care. I will tell you, veterans benefits are under pressure just like every other federal program. And I have to add this. Federal officials for a long time have stood in front of audience and told exactly what they wanted to hear. You have a program, I'm for it. That's how you get $16 trillion in the hole. It'd be great to stand up here today and tell you veterans are going to get more money next year than this year, and the year after that even more. The only way there's any possibility that the programs you all hold dear, whichever programs it is, some of you may not care as much about veterans programs as you do about others. The only way you're going to get those programs to have the capacity at the federal level to do what they need to do is to put folks back to work. This money comes from you. This money comes from working people who go to work and pay taxes. And if you can't get the private sector economy back going, it is not possible that any of these programs will be nearly as robust and as important and as useful as you all would want them to be. And this is why, when I hear Mr. Tillman attack private companies, I just don't get it. Because that's where you all are going to be looking for your next job. And your children to get their next job. And their children, and your friends, and your cousins, and my friends. We look to the private sector to be the engine for doing things in America that are valuable and important. And so to tear down an employer in our district that hires thousands of people, I find deeply troubling, just as we should not tear down any of the employers who are out there working hard every day on the front line, taking risks with their own money to try and build a business, create value for their customers so that they can hire folks that can then in turn take care of their own families.
Can you hear me? Okay. This question is for all three candidates. I would like to know your position on male politicians making decisions about women's reproductive rights.
I'll take first and third. I did not decide in the recent 20 years my position. I decided 40 years ago that I supported women's rights. I don't say that because of this audience. I say that because that's how I live my life. I think women have a right to their own reproductive health, have a right to earn an equal wage to men. I think women have a right to be ministers in the church. I think women should have the same rights that every male has. That's my position.
I think that we should be fighting for men's equality with women because we need to understand that's your superior sex. We need to say, we just need to give it up, guys. I mean, there's a saying in my house. There's a saying in my house, and I want everyone to repeat this when you get home. Give up, give in, shut up, he's right. That's kind of the saying we use. I do think that men really should take a pass on women's reproductive issues, but men are elected to the offices the same as women, and so it forces their hand to have to make a decision. I think that men should do a lot. Men shouldn't just take, if the man is forced to vote on it, they shouldn't take it lightly, they shouldn't take a pass on it. They really need to consider that women do have different needs, and as such, they have a different set of standards with which we have to judge that criteria as far as with women's body, like gestates in there, and so you're talking about the next citizen and how in place you can go to get that citizen. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Well, who could disagree with my opponent that women should have equal rights? I don't think any of us. I'm married. I get it every day. In fact, I was with her today for a couple hours. I learned it one more time. But when it comes to the question I think you're asking about abortion, I think that life begins right at conception. My faith teaches me that for sure. I consider myself an evangelical Christian, but I think science reinforces it. Who can see these infants in the womb and not think that there's a real life there? Not certainly, I don't. And I think every elected official, whether they happen to be man or woman, has an obligation to protect life. And so I've been pretty consistent about that and intend to continue to be.
Representative Pompeo, I'm with the Occupy movement. I've occupied Wall Street and Occupy Wichita. I'd like to read a very brief quote from the Declaration of the Occupation of Wall Street, and then I'd ask you to respond. As we gather together in solidarity to express a feeling of mass injustice, we must not lose sight of what brought us together. We write so that all people who feel wronged by the corporate forces of the world can know that we are your allies. Now, you took over $100,000 from Koch Industries you used to work with them. Why should anyone here vote for you when you represent one of the richest companies in the world that does not have our best interests at heart?
factually inaccurate. I have never worked for them, don't work for them now. I work for all of you. I work for roughly 700,000 plus citizens all across the 4th District of Kansas. And I'll endeavor to continue to do that if elected. You should all look at my positions. If you think they're worthy, you should vote for me. I think they are. I think the things that I stand for, the values I bring to Washington, D.C. are your values. And I'm urging everyone to vote for me for the very set of reasons. I'm happy to talk about any particular policy item that anyone wants to ask about.
Mr. Pompeo, I'm curious how you justify huge corporate bailouts and hundreds of billions of dollars for banks and corporations, yet the people who were hurt by the malfeasance and criminal activities of these people who are still free, you have voted with a bloc with the Republican Party to do absolutely nothing for them and try and do everything you can to make sure anything President Obama does not work out. You have the whole Republican Party, according to Rush Limbaugh, has determined to make him a failure. So how do you justify giving billions to these corporations and banks and throwing the rest of us under the bus?
Well, I appreciate that question. Just for the record, I wasn't in Congress when that happened. You'll recall that the bank bailout was a bipartisan mistake. President Bush, a Republican, and nearly every member of the House of Representatives, Senate voted for both Republicans and Democrats alike. So, with respect to the thing I think you're actually speaking of, I wasn't there, I didn't do that. So your question doesn't quite have the right factual basis. But let me get to the core of what I think you're really getting to. The person who has campaigned in this election cycle on bailouts is not Governor Romney. Even as we speak, President Obama is probably speaking to the citizens of Ohio in a commercial, talking about bailouts for enormous corporate interests, the largest Fortune 500 countries in America, the auto manufacturers. I think these things were devastatingly bad. And it didn't matter that that was President Obama's action or if it had begun under a president with an R behind their name. I am as troubled as you are in many respects about how our federal government has cozied up to big corporate interests. I completely agree. In the paper this morning, there was a statement that I'm not pro-business. It's true, but I am pro-free market. I believe in small companies and entrepreneurs and their opportunities to create wealth. I'll stand beside them every single day hoping that they will be the one with the next great invention, and they'll do it because they think they can do something really, really good with that capital, instead of sending that money to Washington, D.C. To be allocated by some politician and not by the private sector.
We've been hit by this depression and we have been getting stomped on ever since. I don't understand it.
I think it's been about almost 100 years since 1913 when they had this monster they called the Federal Reserve. And it's still going strong, and it's still destroying the economic system of the United States, no matter you got a Republican up there, Democrat, or Independent. But we need some brave people willing to say, just like Ron Paul there, to end the Fed. Are any of you candidates willing to stand up and say, hey, it's time to end the Fed? Because with private bankers' name on the top of every dollar bill, it's getting to where their money, they get their money first and destroy the economy, and then no matter what you do, it's not going to make a difference. So I want to know who's brave enough to end the Fed.
Mr. Jefferson.
Yes, sir. This is a Thomas Jefferson question. Thank you very much, sir. For those of you that know your history, the original Thomas Jefferson said, if you consolidate all the money into the hands of a private bank, you will make the slaves of the children of the fathers that founded this country. And he was right. And what we've done is we've created an accidental oligarchy, and we've created a condition of economic slavery instead of one that was physical slavery. Physical slavery required the enslaver to physically bond and bind people and keep them at that place. Economic slavery, the people that are enslaved feed and house themselves, but they still